I would like to introduce our candidates. We have Alexandria Blumer, Eric Alegria, Jeremy Vanderhal, and Ghandi. So now let's begin with opening statements.
First, thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. Thank you all for showing up. My name is Alexandria Blumer. I'm a former special education teacher. I am a mother of 2 students that attend school here in Palos Verdes. And I'm running for school board because I believe it's a fantastic way to give back to the community and serve this wonderful community. As a parent, a teacher, and a taxpayer, I feel like I can represent multiple perspectives.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you as well to the League. They always put on great forums, so thank you, Mary Ellen and everyone. Thank you to the audience for those of you who made the time to come out here tonight. There's a lot going on in the community, so this speaks to the importance of this election. And of course, thank you to my fellow candidates as well for stepping forward, so please be sure to thank them this evening. I'm Eric Alegria. I'm a father of 4, 3 children in elementary school and 1 child in middle school in the district. I've served proudly 2 terms as a city council member, which are concluding over the next couple of months. I am a proud executive of a nonprofit that serves low-income kids throughout 15 states in the United States, giving them mobile eye care. And I've spent several years as a private sector executive as well. I'm also an adjunct instructor at USC, and I'm running because I want to see our schools fixed. I want to expand and make sure that our kids have access to mental health services. And I wanted to make sure that the safety of our schools is as optimal as absolutely possible. And I want to make sure that we continue to grow our academic excellence within the schools. I feel blessed to have the support of community leaders throughout the peninsula, including 4 of the current school board members. And I look forward to a lively discussion about important topics related to the district this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for hosting it, and thank you for everybody for coming out. My name is Jeremy Vanderhal. I'm running for school board. I grew up here in Los Angeles, and after I graduated from high school, I joined the Air Force, and I became a fighter pilot and a test pilot. I've been stationed all over the country and deployed all over the world. I've led large organizations, and I've been part of diverse groups of people working together towards a common goal. And I've been the leader in charge of executing programs with budgets up to $2.7 billion. When I moved back to California, my wife and I moved to Palos Verdes specifically for the schools. And my daughter just started kindergarten, so for the next 13 years, I've got skin in the game. When I started basic training, one of the things I really loved about it was that it didn't matter where you came from, what you looked like, your skin color, what language you spoke. Everybody got the same haircut, everybody wore the same uniform. We all started on the same playing field. And then from there, your hard work allowed you to rise to your own merits. And I think that is a perfect definition of what America is. And it doesn't matter if you're on the left or on the right, or anywhere in between, it's something we can all agree on. And that's something I love about the school board too, is it doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right, this is a nonpartisan office, and we can keep politics out of it. And so despite what some political organizations may say, nobody up here stands against principles that we hold dear. We can all just focus on the kids. And so that's why I'm here. I'm here to fight to protect the kids of this district. So my priorities are, number 1, transparency and accountability. I'm here to represent all of you. And I think that trust affects everything else that's in my priority list. And the next one obviously is high academic standards, because we are an educational organization, fiscal responsibility, and creating a safe learning environment for our kids. And I'm excited to be able to talk about all those things tonight.
Firstly, I just wanted to thank the League and the Chamber for hosting this forum here today. My name is Ghandi, and I am the current school board president. I was unanimously selected by a politically diverse board 2 years in a row to serve in this role. Education has always been my passion, and that is why I gave up my full-time job to become a full-time board member. Because my goal has always been to make a meaningful impact, not just on my own children, but for all the children in our community. In a time when school districts across the country are becoming increasingly politicized, I believe it is more crucial than ever to have a board that prioritizes education over politics. My record demonstrates my commitment to putting policy and the well-being of our students above political concerns. My dedication to serving children is deeply rooted in my upbringing. I remember accompanying my father, a special education teacher, to work and witnessing firsthand the profound impact he had on his students. He empowered them to live life on their own terms and equipped them with the skills they needed to do so. I'm so proud of my time leading on the school board and empowering students with the resources and the tools to pursue life on their own terms. As a school board, we expanded the AVID Study Skills program for all middle school students. We heard from the community and created a brand new dual immersion program where kids can learn from kindergarten in both English and Spanish. We expanded entry points into the math pathways to give students more opportunities to take advantage of advanced math at their own pace. That is why I am seeking re-election. My track record shows that I have consistently kept politics and culture wars aside and focused on what truly matters to my students. With the experience on the board, I believe it is crucial to maintain continuity during this pivotal time. And lastly, I have been endorsed by people of all political views, faith, age, and background because I am a consensus builder and a strong leader. Thank you for your support.
Can you please share a moment where you've worked in a collaborative manner within our community?
Yes. Certainly the last 7 years and 2 terms in the City Council, I hope demonstrate that, echoing what's been commented here by my colleagues, the importance of working collaboratively as a community. That's our greatest asset. A lot's been done. Obviously, we're dealing with a very large issue now, which is in the public eye, which is the landslide. But there's been a lot that's been accomplished over that time, including the expansion, improvement in public safety, the implementation of facilities like our Ladera Linda Community Center, and other programs that I'm proud of, such as the Youth Advisory Committee, which is the first of its kind on our peninsula for our youth ages 7 through 12, or excuse me, ages 12 through 18 rather, come out to tell us their views and help us guide the direction of the city going forward. In all those ways, I've worked collaboratively across and in partnership with my colleagues in the city itself, as well as the other cities across the peninsula.
Thank you for the question. A couple examples. Last year, I volunteered for the district's science fair and worked with a bunch of different people from all sorts of different backgrounds and educational styles to help judge the middle and high school students that had come together to do these amazing projects and came together to basically help enrich the scientific community in our district. On a not as nice level, as my last year when the anti-Semitic yearbook article came out, I worked together with members of my congregation at Ner Tamid, from people from all different political backgrounds to come together to understand that this was a problem for our community, and we joined together and we all, as one voice, came to the board to express what our dissatisfaction with how this ended up. And so working together with people that may not agree on things politically, but can agree when a community in our, or a subset of our community is being hurt.
Thank you so much for the question. I have served on the board for 3.5 years now, and if you look into the audience, many of my colleagues are here today. And one of my colleagues, board member Kurt, always says that as a board, we are a we, not an I. When you're running a campaign, you're an I, but once you're a board member, you're a we. And that's because there is nothing you could do as a board as just one board member. Everything that happens is a collaborative vote of at least 3 or more. And our board should be so proud because we have accomplished so many great things together. As I mentioned in my opening, we changed how the math pathways work to create more access for more students. If you look at test scores, over the past 3 years, over my time on the board, the test scores have consistently increased year over year. One thing that I am very proud of is our curriculum adoption policy and the fact that we were able to work together collaboratively to include parents in the curriculum adoption policy, and it could not have worked out more beautifully. Thank you.
As a special education teacher, I worked and collaborated with multiple people every single day. We work with different service providers. We work with parents, of course, very closely with the families, with administration. So I've had many opportunities to work in collaboration with our community. And as a parent, I was able to serve as the treasurer for the PTA when my youngest was attending preschool at Belmonte.
How much funding have you received from individuals or groups outside of the PVPUSD boundaries? And who are these individual people or groups?
Great question. I'm proud to say that almost all of my funding has come locally. The only ones that are from out of the district are friends or family or colleagues from my master's program. And I'm very proud to say that I have not taken any money from any political action committees. They're all from individuals, people that I either know personally or that have heard me speaking at various events here on the Hill and have been so moved to contribute to my campaign.
Thank you for the question. My answer is really short for this one. All of my money has come from local community members. I have not taken a single dollar from anybody outside of this community.
The majority of my contributions to my campaign have been from community members, and the only people who have contributed outside of the peninsula have been family and friends.
Similar thing, all of my money has come from local community stakeholders.
How are facility improvements funded? What money that the school district has cannot be used for facilities improvement?
Say that again, the second part?
What money that the school district has cannot be used for facilities improvement?
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. So the way our school district is funded is the LCFF funding formula, and that's basically every student in the state of California gets the same amount of money, and every day that a student attends class, the district gets reimbursed for that student. Now that pot of money really goes to the operational day-to-day expenses of the district. So if you're looking at how much of that budget is actually used towards facility spending, I would say it's about 4%, because 85% of the school's operational budget goes towards paying our teachers and our staff and our day-to-day expenses. So really, in the state of California, if you want new facilities, the way the new facilities are funded are by passing a school bond. And there is no other way to get facilities funded in the state of California. When you pass a school bond, you will be able to access matching funds through the state.
It's my understanding that we receive funding through bonds. We have a permanent parcel tax, so your tax dollars fund our schools. Bonds, there's the lottery tax, there's a little bit from here and there. And as far as what is not allowed, the money that's not allowed to be spent on facilities, I believe that would be the teacher's salary. So something between 80 and 90% of the district operating budget goes to teacher salary.
Thank you. I think Ami answered the question. I'll just add a point or two, which is that at least this adopted budget this last year has a $6 million sort of operating deficit. They have to use the carryover funds to ensure that the revenues exceeded the expenses. And so it just gives you hopefully an expanded picture of the state of operating budget within the city, within the school district rather. And of the $147 million in expenses, a fair portion of that is certainly dedicated to the staff. Almost $100 million of that is for the staff itself. Thank you.
So by law, the district is required to spend a minimum of 3% on maintenance, and we are doing that. Other than that, facilities do come from bonds, but I want to just expand a little bit on the LCFF, the local control funding formula. All of this data is public information. You can download it, and I did, and I sorted it by district. And not every district gets paid the same amount per student. We're in our district alone, we're at the 12th percentile. So our students are roughly receiving around $11,000 per student. In LAUSD, they're receiving $16,000 per student. So if you do the quick math, if we did receive the same amount per student per year, and then compare that amount to what we actually are receiving just this year alone, we are being shorted $25 million. And that's due to the LCFF, the local control funding formula. So if we in our district really do want to have more in our budget, the only real way to do that is to demand it from California. And honestly, the only way to make that happen is through legal action. So my idea essentially is to get the 20th percentile and below. So everybody that's also getting the short end of the stick, and work together and with a one unified voice, go up to California and say, let's get the fair and equal funding that we deserve. Because right now, we are not.
What does inclusion mean to you?
To me, inclusion is in the word itself, right? Include. We include everybody. We make sure that every student feels represented and heard and has an opportunity to shine. Thank you. Great question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Inclusion to me means providing a safe and welcoming environment to all children from all perspectives.
So when people say inclusion, typically it's preceded by diversity and equity, so DEI, and I being the inclusion part. Inclusion to me is exactly that. When you say inclusion, everybody's included, nobody's left out. But when kind of folded into the bigger picture of DEI, what it ends up doing is it creates basically a very simplified view of the world, where there's the oppressed and the oppressors. And when you try to do that, basically what ends up happening is that kids are made to either feel guilty for who they are or placed in a victim status. And that just is not something that you want to have anybody feel, but especially children. So when we talk about inclusion, it's a wonderful word, but I think in modern times, unfortunately, I think it's been, the meaning of it has been twisted, and I really want to try to stop that.
That's such a great question. Thank you for asking it. Inclusion is so important. We are a public school system, and inclusion is the most important thing that we could promote. Every student has a right to come to campus and to feel safe every single day. And that is why the programs that we implement are so important. Last night at our board meeting, we passed it. We approved an anti-bullying program for 2 of our elementary schools to pilot. Again, this is another form of inclusion. Making sure that all students feel safe when they arrive at campus is inclusion. And these are all things that we must work towards. Thank you.
What are your thoughts on book censorship?
I don't believe in banning books. I do think that there can be a critical role that parents can play in making sure to appropriately align books based on age appropriateness. That is something that actively happens today in the school district, but I think there's an opportunity to continue to enhance the committees that the district has and to implement the parental voice in that conversation to ensure that there's active dialogue about the books that are available to our kids and that our kids have access to diverse perspectives and views that are appropriate for their age group.
Eric nailed it. Nobody here is trying to ban books, and whatever books are selected, parents need to be involved in that selection. Unfortunately, there are books that try to sneak it through, and they're politically charged. They are sexually explicit, directed towards kids, and those. And they're, for some reason, they are advanced because they continue some sort of political narrative that doesn't need to be there. When I read books to my daughter at home, she loves the Berenstain Bears. We read just fun books that everybody can enjoy, and I don't think that bringing inappropriate books, age inappropriate books, into schools is a wise choice. And then by saying that, you risk being called that you're banning books, and that's not what I want to do. I just want to make sure that, as Eric said, age-appropriate books for children with parental involvement.
Thank you for the question. I absolutely do not believe in banning books. Knowledge is power, and it is really important that books are available for students and for families to read. However, books should be age-appropriate for children. So I think that is the most important thing, so that kids, when they are reading a book, it is appropriate for their age. The second part is parents do have a right to determine what is right for their children to read. As a board, last year, we passed a policy, the Supplemental Instructional Materials Policy. And the purpose of this policy was exactly that, to make sure that the books that are selected for our students are age appropriate. Thank you.
I believe in having parameters. I think we, as parents, have a right to know what our children have access to in the schools. I don't know if that makes me a book banner, but I do believe in having parameters, and I think parents have the final say in what their children are exposed to. It's in California legislative education codes that we have a right to know what our students are being exposed to.
Are you for or against the ethnic studies curriculum, and why?
So real quick background on it, the ethnic studies is a California mandated by 2029, every high school in the state has to have it. The problem is there's a lot of wiggle room in that law, and so lots of different companies and that are developing curricula have created various different curriculum to try to fill that space. And the worst example of it that I can think of is something called the liberated ethnic studies. It was condemned by lots of people as being anti-Semitic and containing lots of propaganda. And in fact, another district here in Southern California tried to implement it via illegal means, and the judge had to stop them. And in fact, so much so that some California legislators tried to strengthen the wording in the law to prevent it through something called AB 2918, and I was very disappointed to see that one of the main opponents to that was the California Teachers Association, and I was very shocked for that. So just to expand on that, unions are not teachers. Teachers are wonderful. Unions have issues with them. This board is going to be super important because we will be the ones that potentially finalize which ethnic studies curriculum. So generally speaking, it's a law, we have to follow it, but it is going to be very important that we select the right one that does not contain propaganda or is filled with hate.
The state of California is mandating that every student will graduate with ethnic studies. Our district has already piloted ethnic studies courses, and the classes have been very well received by students. Our focus should be on kids in our community and what is right for them. And ethnic studies is so important because it teaches anti-bias. So anytime we're talking about belonging on a campus, anytime we're talking about the fact that all students should feel safe on a campus, these are topics that should be covered by an ethnic studies course. And this is why it is so important that our schools teach an ethnic studies course. Thank you.
I think it's a great thing to teach our students about ethnic studies and different backgrounds, different perspectives. My concern is currently we don't have access to the curriculum for the ethnic studies, and that's concerning as a parent. So I'm hoping that by the time it is mandated, I believe 2026 required, I hope we have access to that curriculum.
Yes, absolutely support ethnic studies. I see it as an opportunity for us to learn from each other. I think one of our great assets as a community is just that. We have different perspectives, different views, and different skills. And I've been fortunate to serve this community for a while and see that in action. I think ethnic studies gives us an opportunity, and I would hope locally we can kind of get our arms around, based on our unique community and the tapestry of our community, what makes sense for us in terms of ethnic studies. What do we want our children to have an opportunity to be exposed to based on the unique cultures of our local community. Although I was K through 12 public school, I was educated by the Jesuits, as I like to say, and there was a very balanced perspective of making sure that you have exposure to lots of things, language, history, different perspectives of the world, and different experiences. It is critical to our kids to have an opportunity to have exposure to that as well. Thank you.
Do you think that PVPUSD's children should have fully licensed mental health counselors?
I believe that our schools should have mental health services because by providing our students with mental health services, we are giving them access to their education. If a student comes to school and they are not well, they cannot academically thrive. So having counselors on campus is very, very important to help our students when they need that extra assistance. In addition to that, we have anti-bullying programs, we have social emotional wellness programs, and these are all things that help our students thrive on campus. Thank you.
Yes, they should have access to fully licensed mental health counselors. Currently, we have an organization called SAGE, and I believe that not every therapist is a licensed therapist. This raises a lot of concerns. As a parent, I want to know what they are required by law to disclose. Who are they disclosing it to? Who is holding them accountable? Are they disclosing it to the staff, to the parents? What's going on, and why are unlicensed people treating our children?
I spent 18 years as a healthcare executive in 3 of the largest healthcare systems in our country. And I will say mental health is something that everyone has to be involved in and get their arms around. I do think the end of the process needs to include a licensed therapist. And I'll just highlight that Alcove is a more recent program located on Prospect through the Beach Cities program. Our kids are not necessarily taking advantage of that today. We've got about 5% of those kids that go there are from the peninsula. We have a unique opportunity to bring some of their wellness programs locally, perhaps through a satellite program, to make that connection for our kids to have access to a program of that caliber. So there are opportunities, and I do think that we all have to play a role. And I'll add, including our teachers. I think our teachers are now getting an opportunity to get broader understanding of where there are opportunities to have conversations with children and parents, and make sure that kids are being connected to resources that are available to them. Thank you.
Yes, our kids should only be seeing licensed therapists. But bigger picture, when it comes to mental health, I'm a numbers guy. I like metrics. My wife is a psychiatrist, and I asked her, hey, if you were designing a program for a school-wide mental health program, what are the metrics you would use? And she gave me a whole list of them. I presented them to the board and asked what the metrics are, and I still have not received an answer for that. Alex mentioned SAGE. That contract started several years ago, and at the time, it was one of the assistant superintendents of the district was either on the board or friends with somebody on the board of that contract. Regardless, we've been on it. It's $1 million a year. Anecdotally, we've got some good feedback from it, some not so good feedback on it. But we don't really know is it having any actual tangible results? And the only way that we can do that is to, number one, do the study on it and be able to ask questions of the SAGE program leaders. And the way to do that is to bring them in front of the board and do that publicly. And in fact, a board member did request that, but we just found out at the board meeting last night that the 2 people that select what goes on the board agenda tried to pull it from the list and just send it in an email. And thankfully, the originator of that board request was able to pull that back on. So yes, mental health is an issue, and we do need to address it. But do we just throw money at it and it's into the black hole and it disappears, or do we actually get any kind of tangible result from it? And kind of just as an example of how that happens, back during COVID, the school received $15 million and was supposed to be spent on stuff like ventilation and HVAC. A lot of it was spent on mental health. Flash forward to this week, now we don't have air conditioning for the heat wave.
Are you for or against AB 1955, which says that if a child tells faculty that they identify as a different gender, the school does not have to inform the parent? This law takes effect in January 2025.
I do not support this legislation. I do not support Assembly Bill 1955. I think it is crucial to keep parents involved in their children's education every step of the way. Some people might say, well, the child might be abused at home if their parents find out. If a teacher or staff member suspects abuse in the home, they are a mandated reporter. They are mandated to report that, and that is the extent that a teacher should have involvement in a child's social life.
Yes, thank you for the question. As I mentioned earlier, I want schools to be a protective, inclusive, and safe and welcome place for all children. I don't believe that the definition of the interpretation of AB 1955 actually prohibits parental communication. It does not. We've clarified that. And there is an opportunity, it's not forced secrecy for parents, and I'm a parent of 4, so I absolutely want to know what's going on. I want to be involved, and I can continue to do that through the observation in the classroom, talking to teachers, reviewing educational records, so that exposure and opportunity to stay informed is still there. Thank you.
I'm glad you asked this question. I have the text of the law right here. An employee of a school district shall not be required to disclose any information related to a pupil's sexual orientation or gender to any other person without the pupil's consent unless otherwise required by state or federal law. So right off the bat, they wrote this knowing that there is, in fact, a federal law that directly counters that requires parents to have full access to every single school record. And in fact, you know that California is doing something weird because their own website recommends to school districts that they create two different sets of records about kids, one real and one fake. And a trial of this happened down in another district. Basically, they had a policy that was the same version of this law, and a lawsuit was brought against the district, not by parents, but by teachers, because they were worried that they would have to be put in a position where they would have to lie to parents. So look, I love my daughter, and I will love her no matter what she ever chooses to do in life, even if she thinks that I'm not going to love her, or if she doesn't think I'm going to. But this is not the way to solve that problem, by putting a barrier in between parents and children. So there is a lawsuit pending on this law. And so while it works its way through the court, we'll find out what's going on. But in the meantime, our district owes it to our teachers and our parents how they're going to interpret and implement this. Because if they don't, there will be confusion. And when there's confusion, there's potential for lawsuits, and nobody wants that to happen.
I wanted to start off by saying there is a lot of misunderstanding about AB 1955, and clearly a lot of misinformation is also being spread. This January, this policy will be signed into law, and we must follow the law. As we know it, this law prohibits school districts from dictating how and when staff communicates with parents as it relates to student expressing their gender or sexuality. Research shows that students thrive when there's open communication between teachers, parents, and students. And that is especially true for our LGBTQ community. And to clarify, this law does not prohibit communication with parents. School staff, teachers, and school staff and teachers will be able to continue communicating with parents and guardians as they always have. And this is how things are working at PVPUSD. I have seen nothing different in my time on the board at PVPUSD. The last thing I will say is that as a district, we haven't consulted with legal counsel yet as to how this is going to play out in the district. So it's very important to get all the facts before we make a decision about this. I am a parent, and parental involvement is very important to me. I do know that there was a previous version of this bill, and that version could be seen as disrupting the relationship between parents and students. That clause was removed. So what we should remember here is this law is there to protect our most vulnerable students. And suicide rates against our LGBTQ students are 41% higher than the general population. Thank you.
What is the role of schools in supporting LGBTQ youth?
The role of schools to me is to provide a wonderful environment and an extension of the family to help support our kids in their educational pathway. And it's essential in my mind, regardless of the community, that we are inclusive and that all the perspectives of all of our children and all of their unique differences are celebrated, protected, and I think that is critical to the role that our schools can play in supporting our kids as they go through their experience and growth in our community. Thank you.
The purpose of the school district is to educate the kids in a safe learning environment, period. It doesn't say anything about sexual orientation, doesn't say anything about gender identity, doesn't say anything about race, doesn't say anything about religion, and I don't care about any of those for anybody. The school is there to educate the kids in a safe learning environment, period.
A public school system should be safe for all students to attend school in a safe environment. We must protect our LGBTQ youth because, as I mentioned in my previous answer, our LGBTQ children are 41% more likely to have suicidal ideation. So it is very, very important that we support our students. This is also why mental health is so important on campus, because in order for a student to thrive academically, they have to be okay mentally. And being able to access mental health, being able to have programs where they're getting to learn about other students and other students are learning about them, these are the ways that our students can thrive. Thank you.
I think the role of the school district is to support all of our students. We send our kids to school so they can learn. We need to stick to English, math, social studies, and history, science. I believe we need to support all of our students and make sure everyone feels safe.
Do you support Measure SOS? Why or why not? And can the funds be diverted for something other than rebuilding?
So first off, as a candidate, I don't think it's my role to persuade you or dissuade you about the bond. I want to give everybody the facts and let you make your own decision, because there's some good arguments for and some good arguments against. So I will first say, generally speaking, I don't like taxes, and I especially don't like taxes in California, because California tends to view us as a piggy bank, and they go and take money from us and spend it on their pet projects elsewhere. That said, the bond is maybe the only opportunity in California where local taxes stay local and get spent local. Our schools are in terrible shape, and they need to be repaired. So, but one reason that we need the bond, and I do support the bond, I plan on voting for the bond, is because our own representatives have basically left us no choice, and they're saying you either have to pass a bond or sue the state. If I had been on the board, I might have preferred a smaller bond, just to make sure that we get a win, because if not, if we get 2 bonds in a row that don't pass, we might get in trouble there. But the bond alone is just a Band-Aid. If we just rely on that only, we're just gonna have the same problem in another 20, 25 years. So I think it needs to be part of 3 things. Number 1, we need the bond in order to repair the short-term immediate needs of the schools. We need to take a real sharp look at our budget and make sure that we don't have any unnecessary spending. But the last one is going back to what I said earlier about the LCFF and getting every cent that we could possibly claw back from California, so that we have a larger annual budget, and maybe then we don't need the bond in the first place because we have enough money to keep our facilities up and running.
Yes, I support our school bond. Our school board, which is a very diverse school board, unanimously voted to put this ballot measure on the election, the November election. Research shows that when our facilities are good, our students are able to achieve even greater. This is why this bond is so important, because right now our facilities do not reflect our students' achievement. In our community, because we wanted to make sure that whatever bond we put on the ballot was what the community wanted, we did 2 community outreaches, one in January and again in June. And with that, we were able to get feedback from the community to understand where they were comfortable with the bond. That is why we came in at the lowest bond term that was suggested to us by our advisors, and that is also why we chose the lowest bond amount. When we look at funding, as I mentioned earlier, there is no other funding in the state of California for facilities. So it is very important that we pass a school bond so that our students have good facilities to obtain their academics. Basically, if you want to redo facilities in the state of California, you are going to have to pass a bond. Thank you.
I have concerns about the bond. Our school board, not just our current governing school board, but we have a history of money mismanagement, wasteful spending, so that concerns me. I believe if the bond is going to be on the ballot, okay, so you're going to vote for it or you're not going to vote for it. If I am elected on the school board and the bond passes, I will do everything I can to be transparent. I believe everything should be discussed in open session. There should be no closed session meetings about money being spent from this bond. If I'm elected and the bond does not pass, I believe there are a few options. Community fundraising is a great option. Our buildings are also eligible because of how old they are. They are eligible for some state funding. I think creating Rotary plugs for each campus is a great idea. In an ideal world, yeah, we could just have a huge lump sum of $300 million, but that's just not feasible. I don't think it should be deferred onto the taxpayers to spend more money, you know? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I actually will try to implore all of you to support the bond. I support the bond. I've spent 7 years, 2 terms in the city council, and I'm very proud of the record that the city council has had over that time of eliminating taxes, keeping fees consistent, and so on. There are times, though, when you just need to pay, and in this sense, we need to invest in our community, in our kids. I think Monday's a perfect example. of where we had to cut the school day short and impact learning simply because our facilities are incapable of dealing with the air conditioning properly. Many of our schools in the district. It's essential. Of course, Miralest is still on the generator that it got on in February. I mean, these are really essential things, and honestly, it's a poor reflection of what we are as a community, the community that I'm so proud of. PV is a special, special place. So I do absolutely think we need to support it. Supporting the bond during this particular ballot will also potentially make us eligible for additional matching funds. I certainly hear the comments about transparency and clarity. I think the board has wisely refined the list from the prior attempt at a bond in 2020 to more of a specific wants list. Electrical, roofing, all of those conditions that are essential to keeping our kids safe and a safe environment and in a quality learning environment. We will get to a point where it's going to negatively affect our kids and take down overall performance in our community. And of course, we have an opportunity, I think, as a community to band together and make sure we prevent that from happening. So let's do it.
With regard to your experience as a parent in the district, what specific problem do you aim to fix?
That is a great question. I have 2 students in the district. I have a 5th grader and a 7th grader. If I were to pick one problem that we have to fix, I would go back to our board meeting from last night when we passed an anti-bullying policy. The one thing I hear of over and over again on all of our campuses is that bullying exists. And maybe it exists in different ways across all campuses, but this is something that we need to handle. It's bullying, it's anti-bias, it's teaching our kids to be inclusive and accepting each other, it's educating our students. Because, like I mentioned before, a public school should be a place where all kids feel welcome, and this is what we need to strive to achieve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alex.
As a parent, Michael, I'll share a little personal information. My oldest son has an IEP, that's an individualized education plan, so he is eligible for special education services. And as a former special education teacher, I have seen firsthand our special education department is very neglected. We need more support, we need teachers, we need curriculum, we need materials, we need a lot. So that's something that I would definitely prioritize if I was elected.
Thank you. As a father of 4, and who's beginning with a 7th grader to appreciate the immense academic pressure that our students experience, my mind is around the role that we play as a society, locally, as a community, and as the schools as an extension of that, making sure that we're treating the whole person. So to me, we've talked about mental health, but I think wellness as a whole is critical to the ongoing success of our kids. I think there's an opportunity. We've actually, in recent years, amongst the 4 cities in the school district, had several meetings to talk about ways we could potentially throw a community event to bring more awareness to mental health. In general, we're trying to do more to make sure mental health services are more commonly understood and the community resources are understood by families as well. I think we can play an important role in making that information available. But ultimately, I think our kids, along with the academic goals that we set for them, can hear the message from us as a community that we are concerned about them and them as a whole person as well. Thank you.
As a member of the military, my job is to protect the country. As a father, my job is to protect my daughter. When she goes to school, I'm relying on everybody at school to keep her physically safe. Last night, after the school board meeting, I talked with one of our SROs, a retired police officer, Officer Watt, and he does an amazing job. He and Officer Rosas, who are 2 amazing SROs, do an amazing job of keeping the school safe. But there's only 2 of them for all the schools. So I think, number 1, we need to look into potentially hiring more SROs, maybe 3 more, 1 for each of the middle schools, to do that. I think communication about safety is also important. So this week, parents from PV High School received an email that there was some sort of incident that was so bad that it required calling in the Lomita Sheriff's Department. But they didn't receive that email until later in the day after their kids had already gone to class that next morning. And so that lack of communication needs to be improved drastically. Safety needs to be the number 1 issue, because if we're not safe, doesn't matter, we can't learn. So I think In addition, if the bond passes and we use some of that bond money to update or replace fences, I think we need to keep safety in mind and not just aesthetics and not just a form, fit, function, replace. And lastly, I think we need to have a director of safety and grant writers whose sole job is to get more money for us and focus solely on safety. But again, in order to do that, we need more money, so we need to claw back more money from the LCFF, getting more money from Sacramento, give it to us that we deserve.
How do you see the role of Rancho Del Mar in our district? The benefits, the drawbacks?
Rancho Del Mar, I believe, is the adults or the continuation school. I think it's a great thing. I think it's fabulous to offer vocational opportunities to our kids as they transition from school, our little bubble here and into the real world. I support it. I think it's very important.
Learning never stops, I think, as those of us in the room can attest. And we're fortunate, along with Rancho Del Mar, to have the benefit now of UCLA South Bay and all their extension programs and so on. I think it's essential that we have those opportunities for all of us to continue to educate ourselves. So I think it's wonderful. Last
night at the school board meeting, one of the three student board members talked about how he moved to California, initially did a year at Penn, and found out it just wasn't the right fit for him. And so he went to Rancho Del Mar, and now he's doing amazing. So he's able to have academics that work for him. He's still able to do sports. He has a job. I think it's great because maybe the form and the schedule of Peninsula or PV High just isn't right for you, and we have a third option, and I think it's great, and I'm so glad to see that he's thriving there.
Rancho Del Mar is a great program. It is our continuation high school. And as I've mentioned over and over again tonight, the role of our public school system is to make sure that every student can access their education. So while PV and Penn may not be right for all students, Rancho Del Mar offers a third option where students can learn at their own pace with more one-on-one support with teachers. It's also a great program for students that are doing other things outside of the district because now they have a little more flexibility in how they are getting their education. So it's a great program and I absolutely support it. Thank you.
What would be the first thing you'd want to get done as a new or continuing member of the school board?
Good question. I think the first thing is culture matters. The way we do business is almost as important as what we accomplish. I'll fudge a little here and I'll answer it in two ways. One is I want to build a culture by getting out there immediately and educating myself on what the experience of our principals is. I've had an opportunity to talk to several, but I would want to do more of that. But as we're getting into that, and it was touched on already, but I'm very proud of the fact that I spent 6 years helping move our Peninsula Public Safety Committee forward. That's a committee that's comprised of our 4 cities, and it has had historical involvement from the school district. The SRO program that was acknowledged earlier was funded in part by the leadership of our team amongst those 4 cities to fund half of that program. And I agree, it's absolutely essential, I think, to take this opportunity after a couple of years to evaluate its efficacy and potentially consider expanding it as well. Thank you.
I think kind of from a procedurally, this is kind of a nerdy, wonky thing, but right now the way that the agenda items are selected is a joint decision between the board president and the superintendent. And sometimes what that may mean is that important things that the community wants to see on there aren't put on there because for various reasons. So maybe relook at how that selection process happens to make sure that things that are necessary just for the normal function are on there, but also things that the community wants to have on there are important or are talked about. That's more of like an internal procedure thing. From a district-wide thing, one of the things that we still haven't yet talked about is just plain old academics. So we are number 6 in the state, which is great, but the recent standardized testing showed that in 11th grade, 20% of the students aren't meeting the California standard for English, and more than 30% aren't meeting the standard for math. And so this was the same problem that I talked about when I was up here 2 years ago, and it hasn't been addressed. We don't know why. So what's with that mismatch? So one of the things I would do is try to commission an academic review committee to figure out what's going on, what's the difference between that gap? Because we've got really great numbers, high graduation rates, high college placement, but our standardized testing is not meeting that. So I'd like to take a closer look at that.
Firstly, I'd just like to say academically, our students thrive. If you look at our California state testing year over year for the past 3 years that I've served on the board, there has been a consistent increase year over year. With that being said, my number one priority is school safety. This is 2024, and we really need to take safety really seriously before something happens in our own community. That is why it is so important that our kids feel connected, and mental health is also a really big part of this. As a board, over the past 3 years, we have taken safety really seriously, and that is why there's more and more perimeter fencing going up around our schools. That is why we have 2 SROs. We have worked with the city in hopes of gaining a 3rd SRO because the Miralest side of the hill is completely isolated. So it would be very nice to have an SRO that could take care of that side of the hill. We do safety drills, and our PVEPD and Lomita Sheriff has engaged in active shooter training. As a board last year, we passed a resolution for gun safety storage. So when we hear threats, when we hear threats on campus, we take them very seriously. And the first opportunity the district gets to be able to communicate that with the parents, the district will take that opportunity. So there is nothing hidden there. But safety is a top priority, and I would like to continue looking into different ways to make our campuses safer. Thank you.
Right. So there's so many things that our district is already doing wonderful. They're spending a lot of time making sure our students are safe, our students are doing great academically. Some mental health we're addressing. Something that I have already mentioned that is severely neglected is our special education department. I would really like to get in there and look at the programs, and I believe a lot of money is being wasted on legislation because we are not always in compliance, and that's concerning. That's a lot of money going out the window. So, and our students, they deserve the best. So all of our students, including our special education students, they deserve the same support and representation.
Is there any money currently in reserves for building maintenance?
Yes, so by law, like I said earlier, there is 3% is required minimum of the budget to be spent on maintenance and facilities maintenance. In addition, there is a 5.3% or so of current reserve, but that's for emergency funds. And so yes, so we are meeting all the law requirements of the laws. And it's nice. It's basically they did a whole bunch of summer projects to fix like roofs and stuff like that. They're Band-Aids, and it'll last for a couple of years, but they're basically not intended to last a long time. And so hopefully, if the bond is approved, then that kind of money can then be used to make it so that the annual facilities maintenance that is part of the annual budget can actually be used for other things, not just Band-Aids that to prevent water from leaking in.
The state of California requires that a public school district in the state has a 3% reserve. Our board and the previous board has taken a more conservative approach where we, as a board, decided through a policy that we would have a 10% reserve. However, I did want to clarify that 3% reserve does not go to facilities or facility needs. That is literally what it is, a reserve for the district so that just in case there were funding gaps, that would be able to bridge the funding gap. When it comes to facilities, that is part of our day-to-day operational budget. As I mentioned, 85% of that operational budget goes directly towards paying our teachers and our staff. So only about 4% of that budget annually is used for our facilities maintenance. Thank you.
I don't think I can add anything else that hasn't already been said. There's a 3-4% reserve for our facilities. I do think there is an opportunity to trim down some of the wasteful spending and the money could be used for our facilities. For example, the SAGE counseling, I believe the contract is for $750,000, and these are the unlicensed therapists. Some of them are unlicensed. We could have fixed a lot of roofs with that. We could have done some facility maintenance. So I believe that there is more in there, but we just need to pay attention.
Yeah, I think that my colleagues have adequately answered the question, but I want to add a few additional thoughts just about opportunities from my perspective. And I suspect the board has already considered some of these things, but if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, one of the things I'd be interested in looking at is the revenue side. It may be sort of moderate opportunities, but you can always look at your leasing on the revenue side to see what you can do there. When you have the monies available, there's also an opportunity, and again, the city of Rancho Palos Verdes, I think we've done an effective job of going from about a 2 to 3% return on some of the savings to about 4 to 5% return. So a thoughtful investment strategy could bear a small but ever-growing revenue for the district. And then on the expenditure side, there's about $11 million in services and $4 million in materials. I don't suspect there's a lot of waste in there, frankly, but I think there's always an opportunity to look for opportunities to get better vendors and make things a little bit cheaper. Use electronic communication as much as possible and electronic means, for example. Thank you.
Thank you. What percentage of the PVUSD budget is for special education?
That is a great question. Actually, the special education budget changes from year to year depending on the needs of the district, but about 10% of our budget goes to special education. However, like I said, it depends on the needs of that particular class in that year. The great thing is, last year we started a new program called the TOP program for special education students transitioning to independence. Last night they were at the board meeting and they had an opportunity to present, and it was wonderfully refreshing to see our students working in jobs in the community, in our own community, and the fulfillment that they received from that. So it's a great program, and I'm glad that we are funding it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My answer is simple, not nearly enough.
Okay, thank you. Eric?
Repeat the question, please.
Yeah, the percentage of the budget that is devoted to special education.
Yeah, as I looked at the adopted budget, $25 million roughly for special education, excuse me. There may be line items that I'm not accounting for that the current board could speak to as well, but that's of about $147 million expenditures for the operating budget for the 24-25 cycle. So it's a fair portion of the budget.
I think everybody answered the data question of it, and so really the only thing to just comment on is special education in our district. And I think we've all talked about making sure that everything is a safe learning environment for everybody, and that everybody that there's nobody that's neglected, and making sure that we do a review of if that amount is enough or not, and we allocate the appropriate resources for appropriately.
How will you protect LGBTQ children at school from bullying?
I think we protect our students that are part of the LGBTQ community the same way we protect all of our students, right? There's 2 bullying programs that are being piloted right now. And I think just being open, leading by example. I think it's really important to lead by example. Our children see us, adults, parents, teachers, and we need to model that for them.
As we've talked about, I think in this forum, it's essential to maintain the protection of every single student in our schools. That is, I think, essential. I think part of that experience is the education to all kids about anti-bullying as well, again, as to diverse perspectives, diverse experiences, and to make sure that as a community, again, we celebrate the diversity of who we are, ultimately. I think I'll land my answer there. Thank you.
The answer to your question is we protect LGBT kids the same way we protect all kids. All kids deserve the same protection. What I find shocking, I didn't actually know this until last night at the board meeting, is that there is not a district-wide bullying policy. It's kind of school by school dependent. They have different bullying programs, and some schools do it differently than others, which seems crazy to me. So we need to have a district-wide bullying program that is adopted and used all district-wide. Now, there was a bullying pilot program that just got adopted or accepted last night. I have a problem with that one for a couple of reasons. One, there was no metrics associated with it. The only hard piece of data that the board got was a survey, and everybody on the board agreed that the survey was inappropriate because it required kids as young as 3rd grade answering questions about sexual bullying that they may have received, and you're required to accept these surveys in order as a condition of the grant. And there's a lot of experience behind this bullying program, anti-bullying program rather, but a lot of it is in other countries, and it may not necessarily apply here. There's also a lot of data sharing that is required with it. We basically send a lot of our data to LA County, and LA County just had recently had a large data breach. So the way that this was happening was very, very sudden with not a lot of time to vote on it, and I think we need to do a more thoughtful process.
Thank you. Firstly, I would like to start off by correcting the fact that we do have anti-bullying programs in our schools. One of those programs is the Second Step program. We have a lot of social and emotional wellness programs. Last night was just an additional anti-bullying program that we were trying to adopt because, as we all know, this is an issue across all districts, not just ours, but addressing it head on is very, very important. So we are piloting a program to look at this bullying program in particular to see if it would benefit our community. Now, going back to the original question about our LGBTQ youth, our campuses must be safe for all students, and that includes our LGBTQ youth. As I mentioned earlier, our LGBTQ youth have higher suicide rates compared to the general student population, 41% higher. So we do need to take more time and pay extra attention to this very vulnerable population. Thank you.
How will you improve security for our students?
Yeah, I think we touched on the school resource officer program. Forgive the acronym. I think those of us who are around it just get sort of accustomed to the terms. That's a critical program, I think, because in my mind, the preventative measures are the most effective approach to school safety. So as was acknowledged, we have been exploring in conjunction with the cities the potential to add a third. It had been the point of discussion with Dr. Churns for his transition. It needs to be revisited and considered. The vision for that role was not just for the high schools themselves, but that they would be an important resource to that sort of cluster of schools, including the middle schools and the elementary schools. I think that, along with just ongoing education to our teachers about what to look for, just continue to expand their ability there. And then, although we are using cameras at our sites in discussion with the superintendent, I've found the cameras to be very effective use in our overall general community policing, and I think there's an opportunity to continue to identify and use technologies like cameras on our sites to ensure that the people that are on the campus are supposed to be there, and that there's coordination that's happening actively throughout the day. Thank you.
So I already talked extensively about ideas I have for safety, but one thing I forgot to mention, and actually I was reminded by a woman that came up to me during the break. She asked me about basically having volunteers write for grants. So we're basically kind of decelerating this because we don't have enough resources to hire administrative staff to write these grants. And basically, if you had them, it's money begets money, and we have all these grants available to fund more things. And so I think one of the amazing things that we can do is we have a lot of really smart people in our community that are very interested in helping our community. And so one of the ideas I had is exactly what just happened here in the break, and ask the community members that are experienced with grant writing to write those grants and get that, because there's so much security money out there. We just don't have the time and the resources to do it. We have somebody like Brenna that writes like a grant. Brenna is one of the assistant superintendents, and when she does, it's great, but she's got so many other jobs, we just don't have enough. So that's one of the ideas that I have.
Safety is a top priority, and I have addressed this earlier in the evening. One of the things that we've done over the past few years is increase perimeter fencing. This is something that we're going to continue to do because not all of our schools are completely protected at this time. So that is something that we have to do. The schools that do have the perimeter fencing have the push doors so that it is easy for the students to leave, but it makes it difficult for students to enter. As I mentioned, we have two resource safety officers that work at our high schools, and I would love to work alongside the city to add a third resource safety officer. We have cameras on our campuses, and those are increasing every day to be able to keep our kids more safe. One thing that I heard after our most recent school shooting is that a lot of schools have panic buttons so that it's an easy way to access the police department. I would love to be able to look into this to see how we can implement this onto our own campuses. And the last thing that I would like to mention is that you cannot talk about safety without mentioning mental health. Because if our students are not okay, and there is no way to identify that a student is not belonging or okay, there is no way to prevent the safety issues that can occur. Thank you.
I will just echo what everyone up here said already. Definitely increasing the SRO. I think we should continue to partner with the City of Palos Verdes Estates. We have our own police department and Lomita Sheriff Department. It's always refreshing to see them canvassing on our school campuses. I love what Ami said about the mental health, because that's a huge part of it. We've got to stop it before if someone's struggling, we need to get them the help as soon as we can, and we need to not let it we need to make sure it doesn't elevate to these tragic levels.
Give specific examples of parental involvement in public schools that you think is appropriate.
So I'll give some examples right now. So my daughter's kindergarten teacher has all sorts of opportunities for us to volunteer in the classroom, and I think that's absolutely great. And I think that parents, first of all, parents according to California Education Code law are allowed to. They're allowed to know what materials are teaching, what records are happening, but they're also allowed to volunteer, and I think it's great. And I think the trifecta of students, parents, and teachers working together, when that melds perfectly, it's wonderful. And I've already gotten the chance to be in class with my daughter already this year, and it was so amazing. Our teachers are so amazing, and what they do is just so great. So volunteering in the classroom, number one, volunteering for other things, administrative functions if they need help, helping to select curriculum and being involved in that, getting involved in all the committees that are out there. And I think we need to, one of the things that was discussed was bylaws for board-appointed committees. And I think one of those things should be just to emphasize that if it's something that directly affects students, that there be a certain number of parents on that committee because they have a vested interest in what goes on.
As most of you know, I'm a parent of 2 students in the district, and actually my kids are here today. So when we talk about parental involvement, this is a topic that is really, really important to me, because parents have a right to be involved in their child's education. And there's tons of ways to be involved in your child's education. One is to volunteer on campus. And we have one school that's a parent participation school where parents participate on a daily basis in their child's classroom. Another way parents can participate is through the PTA, and that our PTA parents are so involved in making sure that our students have the best opportunities available. And the last thing I'd like to mention is changing, over the course of the year, over the course of the last 2 years, our board has changed certain policies to increase parental involvement in curriculum. Now, this is a really big deal because last year this was kind of like a pilot program for us where we had 2 parents who participated in the AP US History pilot. And what we saw was amazing. 2 parents came together from different ends of the political spectrum, and they were able to work on this committee, work together and select a textbook. And what we saw there was amazing. And this is what we should see throughout our community. And I hope we could take this model and apply it to other committees and different policies that we have. Thank you.
Certainly volunteering in your child's classroom is appropriate. There's many opportunities, especially at the elementary level. You can do garden, you can do library. I think another way that parents can be involved that is appropriate is showing up to the school board meetings. Read the agenda, show up, listen, get a front row seat and hear what's going on, the people making the decisions for our kids.
I appreciate this question. I've spent the last 4 years of my dissertation focused on research in this space. you can imagine parental involvement definitely highly correlated to the success, academic success of our kids. Not a surprise, and that's one of the things that makes this community so special. It's part of our special sauce. I think a few things were mentioned, but classroom participation is huge. Of course, that secret reader program is always wonderful. Facility improvement, so there's opportunities for, as parents, for us to lend a hand, a helping hand literally to the sites themselves in support of the principals of those schools. And of course, there's events that you can chaperone and volunteer and be around. And I think that's what makes this community so special, because we want so much for our kids and we want to be involved. I'll add one final point, which is, again, in the city, I think we've leveraged really successfully all the great expertise in this community. With the existing committee structure of the district, I think there's a unique opportunity to sort of evaluate which committees we can pull more parental perspective in. Let's take the expertise of the parents and make them one of the critical voices in these committees to help guide us through some of the decision making we do at the district. Thank you.
What is your plan for infrastructure should the bond not pass?
This is a really tough question and something that we all really need to consider. If the bond does not pass, we will have to look at other ways to take care of our facilities needs, because the facilities needs are not going away. And the options are not popular options. We would have to look at closing campuses, which is a real it's a real disservice to our community, because our community was built around community schools so that parents can walk their kids to school. We would also have to look at selling surplus land. None of these options are great, which is why it is so important to understand how facilities funding work in the state of California and to get behind the bond. Thank you.
So there's a few options. We are, as I stated earlier tonight, we are eligible, our facilities are, for some state funding because of how old they are. They were built in the 60s. It won't be a $300 million lump sum, but it's something. We have community fundraising. Obviously, looking at our budget, we are spending money on items that they're not essential. For example, brain pop for $30,000. We could do some facility repair with that money. I think we need to tighten up our budget a little bit. Thank you.
If the bond fails, and I know I expressed my passion to support the bond earlier, I think the first thing we'll need to do is evaluate the current state of the schools and begin looking at a long-term remediation plan that would have to frankly consider the removal of operation of some of the facilities. That is not a scenario that I want to see. I don't think our community wants to see that. So I think the real approach would be to reevaluate putting a bond on the very next ballot and spending more and more time to continue to educate our community. I am convinced that our seniors, particularly in our community, if they understand and they hear the message, particularly from our kids, as to the experience that they're having in their schools, they'll be persuaded. I think at this point there's just not broad enough knowledge of what that experience is like. So I think that would be our primary step. The second opportunity, as was mentioned earlier, per pupil spending within the school district is under $13,000. The average within California is about $16,000. Nationally, it's about $17,000. It's a hard road to hoe, but there is an opportunity to, I think, work with our state leaders and see if there's an opportunity to set up a separate fund or take some of that LCFF funding that's distributed based on at-risk populations to other school districts, and see if we can create unique opportunities for our situation, a community like ours that just can't quite get our bond passed. Thank you.
I just want to start by saying closing schools and selling land is the absolute last thing we would ever want to do. Because once you sell that land, it's basically impossible to get back, and who knows what will be built on it. We have a lot of issues going on right now with the housing element and high density housing, and that's most likely what would happen if we have to sell the land. So if we do that, we are in dire straits. So I will do everything I can possibly do to prevent that from happening. That said, step number one, because it's going to take a long time for it to happen, is we need to demand California reallocate and to a fair and constitutional way of distributing annual budget funds to our state, because we are, like I said, we're at the 12th percentile. 88% of districts are getting more funding per student than we are. And that is resulting in a $25 million shortage this year alone. So if we can move the needle on that even a little bit, that will help. It may not be to the tune of $300 million right away, but it will be part of the long-term plan. One of the other things we need to look into is, again, tightening the belt on other programs. Basically, that'll just allow us to do Band-Aids for the time being until we figure out a way to have more funding. But we need to also look into, again, everybody talked about it 2 years ago, and not much happened, but the possibility of an endowment. So that way, we are not reliant on bonds. We're not reliant necessarily entirely on the state. We have another option of funding.
What is your opinion on the use of testing and data in elementary schools? And if you're not informed on this issue, how do you plan to become informed?
Right now, our state standardized testing, I think that we could do a lot more with that data. We don't get that data until the following school year, so there's not a lot we can do. I think we should need to form committees to go over that data and help that direct our instruction. I think we do need some metric to measure our students' learning. Thank you.
What is your opinion on the use of testing and data in elementary schools? And then the second part said, if you are not informed, how do you plan to become informed?
Yeah, and my wife and I, who's sitting now in the audience, we have had the opportunity to have this experience. We get the standardized reports for math and reading performance, particularly for our kids as they hit these important milestones, particularly their elementary school experience. I think actually it's being used rather effectively in my experience, meaning that the principal, the teachers are aware of my child's performance, and there's active dialogue with my wife and I about where there's opportunities to put them on a pathway to success. That is something I think we should celebrate in terms of the program that we have today. I think data is very valuable. It doesn't tell the whole story about a child, of course, but it does, I think, give you a good indicator about where early on you can redirect your child to make sure they optimize their overall academic performance and experience.
So like I said earlier, I'm a numbers guy, engineering by trade. So I love numbers. So I think data collection is super important because it lets us know how we're doing. You know, like back in the military, you think you're doing great in your own little unit, but then you get evaluated compared to all the other units across the Air Force, and it turns out maybe there's some areas for improvement. And I think the only way that we have that right now, at least, is statewide standardized testing. And again, the numbers on that aren't necessarily matching our graduation rate. And so, not to say that like our kids are not meeting, are not high performing, but what's with that number? So like we might need to think about having some sort of district-wide policy to emphasize the importance of this, because it might be the only metric that we really have to compare how we're doing to other districts, so that we can continue to claim that we are the number 6 in the state, because I have high confidence that we are doing very, very well, but I would love to have actual numbers that back that up.
We have one of the highest graduation rates in the state of California, and our test scores match those graduation rates. As I mentioned before, when you look at our test scores year over year for the past 3 years that I have served on this board, we have seen a consistent increase. At the end of every school year, our students take the California state testing, and by summer, we have access to how our students performed on our state testing. In addition to that, we get iReady data 3 times a year. And this is the most useful piece of information for our students to understand for our teachers to understand if our students are tracking along, because early intervention is so important. So the minute a teacher sees that a student may not be where they need to be, they can suggest other interventions to help the student catch up. If we're talking about reporting of data outside of the district, typically there is no identifiable data that is reported outside of our district. Thank you.
I have noticed some campaign materials focusing on anti-Semitic discrimination. Why the unilateral focus to the exclusion of other forms of discrimination, specifically anti-Islamic rhetoric? How will you include all people regardless of race, creed, etc.?
I think it's a powerful question, and I honestly I feel a little remiss in trying to give a 90-second response to really what requires, I think, a very deep answer, but I'll just briefly acknowledge the importance of the question, which is we all matter. Our kids all matter, and the spirit of what we've been discussing this evening about creating a safe, comfortable environment for our kids from all faiths, from all walks, to celebrate those differences and to protect those that might be vulnerable is essential. And I think it's inclusive of all of our kids.
Yeah, so the reason why anti-Semitism was front and center for a long time was because there was an anti-Semitic article published in the PV High School yearbook. And so it was front on everybody's mind, and there were lots of people were talking about it. That's not to say that we should only focus on anti-Semitism. We should focus on everything. There should be no discrimination against anybody for any reason, race, religion, anything. So how do you include that? You create policies that allow for, number one, if something happens and the board needs to talk about it, that it be done in open session. A lot of times, they're worried about potential future litigation, and so what happens is they use that as an excuse to talk behind closed doors, away from the eyes and ears of the public, so that we don't know what's going on, and we don't know in the meantime how policies can be updated in order to do that. So my daughter growing up, I don't want her to have experienced any kind of discrimination based on anything about her, nor would I want any of her friends to experience any kind of discrimination. And if that happens, I think number one, it needs to be dealt with, and the policies that deal with it need to be very clear and spoken about in open session, so that everybody in the public can see what's going on. And that unfortunately is not happening right now. And if I'm on the board, I will change that.
So firstly, I would just like to say that is not true. If something is not discussed in open session, it is because it's either active or pending litigation, and therefore it cannot be discussed in open session. Now, going back to the original question, all students must feel safe on campus. So there is no space for anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or hate of any kind. And as a district, when dealing with anti-Semitism at the end of this last year, we took a two-pronged approach. The first was top-down, where we educated our teachers. Over the summer, our teachers went to the Museum of Tolerance to get training there. They also sought professional development, where they were able to take 2 courses, including anti-Semitism in the classroom and how to identify our differences. Now, while this was really focused in on anti-Semitism to address the issues from the end of last year, this addresses all forms of bias on our campus, and it is a very important thing that our teachers have this training. The last thing is that we do have a very robust curriculum already offered above and beyond state standards, and this is something that we need to continue focusing on and continue to grow. Starting from 5th grade, our students read Number the Stars, and this curriculum goes straight through 12th grade, where students learn and analyze the cause and effects of World War II. So we are doing a lot. What we need to do is make sure that all members of our community are engaged, so that all groups feel welcome and safe on campus.
I think anti-Semitism is a hot topic right now because of the yearbook issue. It was printed and distributed to our students, so it was a big deal. It is a big deal. In regards to any discrimination, there is absolutely no place for it. And we, in addition to the programs and the training that our teachers have received, I think that we as community members need to continue to lead by example and teach our kids and tolerance. And that's part of what makes this country, but especially the peninsula. We have so many rich, different, diverse cultural backgrounds. We need to lean into it and make sure everyone feels protected and represented.
What is your plan for engaging with teachers and staff, K through 12, as a board member?
I want to say that I support teachers 100%. I work for the community. So let me just talk real quick about unions and negotiations and stuff like that. I used to be an airline pilot, and I was in a union, and I loved having a union because they were there to protect me and allow me to focus on doing my job. And that the union does a great job of that, generally speaking. When that happens, though, like during negotiations, we obviously would love to have one of our union reps on the board. and that would have helped us as well. I don't think that that's necessarily a good thing, and that's why I'm proud to say I have not taken any PAC money, political action committee money from the school board. I want to maintain a neutral stance on that to support them as best as I can within the means of our budget, as well as to get the best results for our children. And with the time remaining I have left, I recommend everybody looks up on your own time the CASP testing, CAASP, so you can see the results that I was referring to earlier, and also maybe potentially review the board meeting last night where the Office of Civil Rights settlement was completed 2 weeks ago, but nothing was talked about. So the potential future litigation wasn't a factor, but we still didn't talk about the anti-Semitism issue and the policy for the yearbook. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I am proud to work alongside our teachers. The one thing that we know is that student achievement and student outcome is the best when students, teachers, and parents are working together side by side. So it is very, very important to have strong working relationships with our teachers and to use that, because the truth of the matter is our teachers are spending the majority of the time with our students. So they understand academically what needs to be done. They also understand the social and emotional needs of our students. So really when we're looking at data points to understand what we need to do differently moving forward, or where there's gaps in achievement, it starts with our teachers. Thank you.
Okay, so my plan to engage with teachers and staff is to get back to the basics, visit the schools, visit the campuses, attend the PTA meetings, attend the back to school night. Sorry, Dean attended our back to school night last week and it was lovely seeing her. Just making ourselves open and available and keeping an open line of communication with our teachers and being receptive to their feedback.
Well, my mother was a home economics teacher. My grandfather was a history teacher, so I think it's essential, and in fact, I won't point her out, but my child's TK teacher is in the audience as well. I'll just say, Alex, you said it well. Let's talk to them, understand what their barriers are. We need to make sure, I'll just connect this to retention and say we need to make sure we retain our talent, and we keep them here on the Hill. So ultimately, I think when you look at the data, it tells the story that compensation is a component, but it is not normally the highest component when it comes to retention. I think our teachers feeling included, heard, understood, invested in are all steps to ensure that our teachers are actively participating in the process. And as was said, part of that sort of a support cast that helps develop and grow our kids. So let's talk to our teachers. I would plan to get out and visit all the facilities and make sure we understand what the barriers are. We've talked a lot about the sites and the condition of the facilities this evening, which is a huge barrier to teaching. But there are other things that we need to explore, understand, and make sure that we help as a district remediate for them. Thank you.
In 2020, the PVPUSD bond received only 38% of the vote and needed 55 to pass. Since then, there have been two divisive issues in the school district: the Too Bright to See Age Inappropriate book to fifth graders, and then the article in the yearbook that we just mentioned. How do each of you feel this bond can be sold to 55% of your constituents?
The first part of that question is the 2020 bond. One thing I would like to clarify is that I was not on the board when the 2020 bond was put on the ballot. Because that ballot failed, a lot of research went into looking into why the bond failed. The one thing that I wanted to point out that we have done very, very differently this time is in January and in June, we had 2 community engagement surveys to really understand the needs of our community and to really understand what their appetite is for a school bond. The other thing is we've had a lot more time to plan for this school bond. After listening to our community, we decided to go with the lowest bond dollar amount as well as the lowest bond term. The last thing I would like to mention here is that it is very important to engage with our community when we're making these decisions, and that's what we have done this time. During the last bond measure, 85% of the bonds in the state of California failed, and that's because it was a COVID year. So this is completely different, and a different amount of planning has gone into this. Thank you.
I'm going to address the two divisive incidents that have happened. I think what's happening is the community and parents have lost trust in the school board or school district that their children are not protected. And as a mother and a taxpayer, I can say the two most important things are my children and money. And if we can't trust the district with our children, we're probably not going to trust them with our money either. So as far as trying to sell it to the 55% needed to pass it, I don't know if that's going to happen. And I would suggest if another bond is proposed, if this one doesn't pass, to not go for 300 million, start small.
So I think this has been touched on, but as it pertains to the reason for the failure, I think the coronavirus was a big part of that, as was acknowledged. I also think that there was an assessment of sort of wants and needs, I'll call it, and that there was more of an effort, I think, during that bond to include projects for several of the schools, as opposed to just simply prioritizing the acute needs of the district and the schools that are in the most poor condition. So I think really there is a path forward to get to the 55%, and I think that's purely through education. And I think it's us as community members as well as our kids telling the story about what their daily experience is. Please talk to a teacher. I've talked to several, the range of air conditioning problems I've heard and the number of fans that they're having to use, something like 7 to 16. I mean, to operate in a condition where you can't get your kids to focus because they're just too hot is part of the story we need to tell people in our community so they understand the importance of investing in our kids here. Thank you.
I think in order to get the bond passed this year, the board needed to do three things. They needed to show the community that the schools were in dire shape. They needed to be sensitive to the tax issue that people have here in our community, and they need to address the trust issue. I'll give a lot of credit to number one. The school district did a really good job of outreach, of bringing people on tours and showing how dilapidated the facilities are. For number 2 and 3, though, not as great. There was 3 bond meetings at the end of the school year. In the second one, they talked about the tax rate, and the initial tax rate that they landed on was something only slightly below the tax rate that failed 4 years ago. And then I give a lot of credit to our community for reaching out to so many of the board members complaining about it that in the third bond meeting, they reopened that discussion and lowered it to what we're at right now. So I think it kind of just shows a little bit of tone deafness to what the community is sensitive for. But that last one is that trust. I think they haven't done much to assuage the community that they're worthy of the trust, for the exact reasons that was mentioned in the questions. All these closed board sessions that are happening. And in fact, the survey that Ami talked about, one of the questions was, what's a good reason why you wouldn't vote for the bond? And 75% of the respondents said lack of trust in the board. And so they really need to do that. I believe that the bond is necessary. I'm going to vote for the bond, but I'm also going to vote for good governance, because that is what is needed to restore that trust, because we need to fix our schools.
Are you for or against parents being informed about their children's curriculum?
I am 100% supportive of parents being informed about their children's curriculum.
I'll echo that and just say I'll put out a personal plea to the teachers in the community to help me be able to teach my child math. It is a difficult time, and I think that, obviously parents play a key role in the process. So absolutely, they need to understand the goals of the curriculum and support those goals.
Obviously, I'm for it as well, and the law requires it, so it's an easy one to do. So yes.
I am 100% supportive of our parents being involved in our students' curriculum. And in fact, if you go to our district office, you can look at any single book that our students are using throughout school K through 12. So really, that information is very easily accessible. In addition to that, earlier I talked about our curriculum adoption committee and the changes that we made this past year to include parents in that adoption process. And like I mentioned earlier, I think as a board, I could say unanimously, this was one of the things we were most proud of accomplishing together, because 2 different parents on this curriculum adoption committee came together with different political views and were able to select the same textbook through conversation and dialogue and learning from each other. So parental involvement is very important. Thank you.
You each have 1 minute for a closing statement.
I have a track record of advocating for our students and putting their needs first. Our test scores increased year over year during my time on the board. We have brought new programs to our district, and we have further included parental involvement as seen by how our curriculum is selected. I wanted to take a moment to address the misinformation. The topic of the yearbook has not yet been agendized because when there is active litigation or an investigation, certain things cannot be discussed. So while this may seem like a great political ploy for some people, it comes up as misguided and misinformed to me. I believe it is incredibly irresponsible to use a community's pain for your own political gain, and I have never done so and will never do so as a board member. I've tried my best to keep divisive issues away from the boardroom. Putting on a show in the boardroom does not translate to anything good for children. And with that, I urge for you to vote for me, Ami Ghandi.
There's a lot of people out here tonight. We had a lot of big turnout, and I think that shows how important education is to all of our community. And that's why we need transparency and accountability, because we are here, whoever gets elected is here to represent you. People say experience matters, but I will caveat and say good experience matters. If you're not doing a good job, then you don't need to be doing it anymore, because there's so much at stake right now, especially with the bond, and especially with so many other things that we talked about tonight. We need a board that can be trusted, to represent the community and the parents, and be trusted to prioritize protecting kids over protecting the reputation of the administration. There's so many other things on my website that we weren't able to talk about today. I urge you to check it out. It's www.vanderhal4pv.net. If there was a question that didn't get answered, there's another forum here in this same room next week. I hope to see all of you there. And tonight I will be out there answering questions. I look forward to shaking all of your hands.
Thank you again, Mary Ellen. And to the league, you guys always do a fantastic job. Thank you to my colleagues here, and of course, if you get a chance, thank our existing school board members for all that they do for the community. Several are here. I feel very fortunate to live in this community. Like many of you, I don't know that I imagined that I get to spend my life looking at the ocean every day. This is a special place, but I think this is a culminating and milestone moment in the history of our district. I think we have to act fast, and we have to invest in our kids now. And if I'm fortunate to be elected, as we've talked about this evening, I have great focus and priority on making sure we fix our schools, making sure that we focus on the wellness of all of our kids, and we're inclusive of all of our kids, and that we continue to focus on improving school safety within our schools to make sure our kids are safe. I believe my experience as a local leader of several years here in the community, as well as my experience as a company leader, will help me do a good job as a school board member. Thank you so much.
First, I want to address, someone was kind enough to come up to me during the break and explain that I had a misunderstanding about Rancho Del Mar. So I will do my homework. That's my assignment tonight, and I'm going to read up on it, educate myself more on it, and I hope that we can speak more about it next week at the Ed First Forum. I hope everyone will be there. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate the turnout, your time. Those of you who brought your kids here, thank you so much. This is truly what makes Palos Verdes so special, is the parent involvement. And I'm clearly not a politician. I appreciate your patience with me as I stumbled through this forum. I've never done anything like this, but I'm here to represent parents, families, students, teachers, taxpayers. We're all in this together, and I think we do all have the same end goal. We just have a few different ideas on how to get there. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, this concludes our candidates forum for the Palos Verdes Unified School District Board of Education. On behalf of the Palos Verdes Peninsula League of Women Voters, the Palos Verdes branch of AAUW, and the Palos Verdes Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, I want to thank all the candidates for participating and for your really thoughtful answers. They're much appreciated. I also want to thank the audience for attending and for the really good questions. And I'm sorry I couldn't finish all of them. Almost, I had like 5 left, but they were really good. Thank you so much. I hope you found tonight's forum helpful. Again, thank you for attending, and this forum is now over.